Hey BookTube, what's up? My name is Juan, I'm just one reader, and I am here for another recent reads wrap-up. Today is the last day of my spring break vacation. I got 2 weeks of reading that I really enjoyed, and I read some amazing books. And today I will be telling you the books that I read. I think this should be books numbers 14 through 16 that I've read in 2017. So book number 14 was Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. George Saunders is an author that I first encountered last year when I read 10th of December, which was my favorite book of the year, and I have read some of his stuff, and overall he's an author that I want to read everything he ever publishes. I absolutely love his writing style and his way of thinking and his way of approaching writing. I think he's genius. So even though I haven't read everything that he's published, I definitely wanted to read Lincoln in the Bardo. This is his most recent published work. This came out a couple of months ago, and it's his first novel. Now, it's not technically written like a novel, and some reviewers have been really upset by the fact that this has been marketed as a novel when in fact it follows more of a play format. It's written in script and dialogue and like some excerpts and fragments of different source materials. So it's a weird experience, but I thought it was a pretty interesting experience actually, to read something, to experience a story that at first seems simple, but then George Saunders takes it and elaborates on it and creates something different. So I thought it was interesting to see a story told from a different narrative and from a different perspective. The story is, of course, about Abraham Lincoln, who is mourning the loss of his son, Willie Lincoln, who passes away very young. And so it's this very tragic story of how one night Abraham Lincoln went to the graveyard to sort of hold the body of his son. So the story is pretty much that. It's about that. It centers around that. We follow some characters. There were some issues there with the characters for me because some of the characters were really described and fully formed, but most of the others felt like an ensemble. Like they just didn't feel like individual characters with a lot of traits or with anything characteristic to them. So they just felt like, it felt at the end like it didn't really matter which character you were reading. You just read the dialogues and the story, but you didn't really care that much about who was talking or who was really playing any action. So to me that was a little bit of an issue, but there are some characters here that are very funny, very, very funny in your usual George Saunders fashion. So overall I enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 out of 5, which is a positive review. For me that's a good enough book. I enjoyed it and I thought it was really interesting and thought-provoking, particularly in terms of writing and the format of it. So I enjoyed it. After reading Lincoln in the Bardo, I wanted to read something that would blow my mind, and I chose a book that you told me I needed to read, and I'm very happy that I did because this book floored me. I loved it, and that was The Unseen World by Liz Moore. This book just had such an emotional resonance with me. It's a book that I feel everybody who reads it loves it, and I think there's a good reason for that. It's a very endearing, heartfelt story about family, about history, about legacy, about drama, and we follow very interesting, quirky, lifelike characters that I still love and miss. You really get attached to them and you follow them as they go through some trials and tribulations, and there's nothing about this book that I didn't love. Not just enjoyed, but loved. When I finished reading this book, I was devastated, and let me tell you, I am not a very emotional reader. I never cry with books, or I never get that emotional with books, and reading this just made me think of so many things. I was reminded of many movies and TV shows and other things that follow the same kind of, or that explore the same themes. For example, Brothers and Sisters, the TV show, and the movie The Bicentennial Man, and many other things and life experiences that I've had with myself and my family, etc. And this book is just so touching. It's beautiful. It's very interesting, but it's also really enjoyable. I think this is a book that you can recommend to virtually anybody and they would enjoy it. There's something in here for everybody because it's fast-paced, there's a mystery element to it, it's very intriguing and suspenseful, but at the same time, the core, the center of the book is just this emotional family drama. So I gave this book 5 stars. There's no way I couldn't give it 5 stars. I'm so in love with this book, so 5 stars. And last but definitely not least is another book that I gave 5 stars to, which is shocking considering I never give 5 stars to a book without seriously considering it and thinking it over. But this book just floored me as well. Just as The Unseen World by Liz Moore floored me and devastated me and blew me away in its own way, this book also floored me, and it has instantly become one of my new favorites. This is The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz. This won the Pulitzer Prize, the National Book Critics Circle Award, the Anisfield Wolf Book Award, the John Sargent Senior First Novel Prize, etc., etc., etc. A bunch of awards, and it has received a lot of accolades. Junot Diaz has also become one of those authors that I want to read everything that this man has ever published and will ever publish. I know that he is primarily a short story writer, which I love. Now, in The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, we follow our protagonist, Oscar, who is Dominican, but he lives in New York City with his family. And we follow him, but then we sort of shift from his story and we follow the other characters in his family, and we sort of trace them through history. And it's amazing because it becomes this almost Gabriel Garcia Marquez with 100 Years of Solitude type of legacy, family, history thing. It's amazing because we get to understand why these characters have become the people that they are in Oscar's story. And that's really probably the aspect of this book that I enjoyed the most, the history of this family and everything that happened to them. Now, I will say, as much as I loved the writing style, and I really did love it, at first I was really thrown off by it because Junot Diaz employs a lot of references and, well, first of all, he uses a lot of Spanish words and phrases and Spanish phrases that you might not get if you only speak English. So that's something that I found could be something that could hinder some readers from fully enjoying the story. However, you can totally understand and love this book even if you don't get those Spanish things. I do believe that if you use your Google Translate or a dictionary or something, you will get more out of this book because he does use a lot of Spanish. That's something that I actually adored about this book because I am Mexican, but I also have a lot of contact with the English language and the English way of thinking, which is rather, it's quite different from how you think in Spanish. So this book is written exactly the way that I speak and the way that I think, which is a weird Spanglish combination of English and Spanglish. Not just in language, but also in thought process. And I love that we get to see that in the characters in this book. So the writing style can sometimes feel a little bit obscure and difficult because of that, and he also employs a lot of references, political, geographical, historical references, but also a lot of references to like Star Wars and The Lord of the Rings and video games and a lot of nerd culture, if you could call that nerd culture references. I just loved it. This book was totally for me. I thought it was an absolute masterpiece, and I also gave it 5 stars. Now, if you would like to comment down below on what's your opinion on any of these books, or if you would like to read them, just leave your comments down below and we can chat about these books. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Just One Reader.